Hey yo, welcome back, etc. Hope you're swell. Hope you've got something delicious to munch on like this very chill panda. You deserve it. Today, we've got some Anna-Digi deliciousness on the menu from our good friends over at Casio. To my dismay, this reference seems to be possibly discontinued in the US market? Question mark. Yikes. But fear not. If you take a shot into this piece, it's still readily available at various retailers as of the time of this vid's publication, and there are some other alternative options to consider as well that are available direct from Casio with similar aesthetics. Up for review is the Casio AQ-230 A1DMQ robot. An Anna-Digi throwback of modest, nay, demure proportions with a lot to love. I have such a soft spot for affordable, non-G-Shock Casio, and it's been far too long since I've had something in that vein on the channel. It's where I started with my collecting, and I'm keen to showcase more of these delightful homies. Before we get in the weeds here, let's don our spectacles and see what size puppy we're dealing with. We have a diameter of 30 millimeters, a lug to lug of 39 millimeters, a thickness of 8 millimeters, a weight of 47 grams, a lug width of about 18 millimeters, and water resistance, not specified. As is the case with pretty much any Casio in this wheelhouse, your F91Ws, your A168s, etc., we have quite a wearable watch here for pretty much any wrist size. It sits on your wrist like a snazzy, light, nerdy little lily pad on the horological pond or something. Forgive me, I know not what I say, but you get the picture, I trust. There's something magical about a watch with both analog and digital displays. They appeal to our childlike sense of wonder, I reckon. They feel like real gadgets, if you know what I mean. Something to show the other kids in the playground. Obvi, they aren't the inventive marvel they once were in a world of smartwatches and smartphones, all the smarties, but still, they retain a distinctive charm. I could wax philosophical for ages, but let's break it down and start with the baller bits. The versatility. For better or worse, purely digital watches don't have the classy panache or evergreen appeal of an analog piece. Maybe that's a stodgy thing to say, but I guess I've internalized that style consideration. Banish the thought of wearing an F91W to a wedding, for example. No judgment if you do, by the way, but it would make me mentally itchy, I admit. Not so with something like the AQ-230. With a piece like this one, you get the functionality of a digital piece and the more reserved formality of a classically designed analog watch. At a glance, one might not even notice the diminutive digital display at the bottom of the dial, but one would get the impression of a tried and true tank-style format watch. The size comes into play on this front too, since its dimensions are understated and more like dress watches of the past. The functionality. That little digital display puts in quite a lot of work. Like most Casios, the AQ-230 boasts several nifty functions. Cycling through those we have timekeeping, a month-day display, an alarm, a dual time so you can have another zone handy, and a stopwatch. Is it the most user-friendly piece ever made with those functions? Not particularly. With its small and few buttons and the relatively tiny display itself, but they're there. I'm here for them. Another groovy thing to note is that, in addition to the 2 time zones possible on the digital display, the analog time is set independently using the button on the right side of the watch case, so it's actually possible to track 3 different time zones. Pretty dope. Okay, now let's leaven things with a few bugaboos, mostly under the umbrella of the build/specs. There's no getting around that this is, relatively speaking, a very affordable watch, and at the price point we're talking, it's still listed on Amazon, for example, for less than $50 at the time of recording. We have to make friends with some concessions. With this piece and many other affordable Casios, those concessions usually come in the form of a functional if not overly sophisticated or substantial, steel bracelet, and a non-metal case, usually some kind of chromed resin, as we have here. On paper, we're not looking at a particularly robust piece. Casio lists this piece as water resistant, as I mentioned earlier, which according to their handy chart means the watch should be okay in the rain or when washing your hands. Stacking this watch against something like a basic G-Shock, like your DW5600, the classic, on the spec front, doesn't yield a very favorable comparison, especially when you consider they're easily had for the same price, give or take a few bucks. That being said, I've seen basic Casios perform well beyond their specs, both personally and anecdotally from others, so your mileage may vary. Watches of Espionage recently published an article, which I'll link in the description for the curious Georges out there, about testing the F91W in a deep sea setting, filling it with oil, and taking it down almost 5,000 meters with no problem. A fun side note for you, I digress. One could fault the module for a less than stellar accuracy as well, for a quartz piece even. Casio lists plus or minus 30 seconds a month for the AQ-230, but again, take that with a grain of salt. They tend to under-promise and over-deliver on that front most of the time, but it's worth mentioning. Oh, unless I forget to mention, in true dress watch fashion, there's no lume on this piece, and no light either. Kind of a bummer, but there it is. I'm ultimately left with the question of who this watch is for exactly. I think there is a certain group of folks who would cotton to this piece, but the notion that this piece could have a broader appeal past a certain point doesn't really seem that likely. I see the AQ-230 as a piece for someone who likes a bit of quirk, but won't sweat what this watch lacks, but will appreciate this watch's looks, comfort, and affordability. Although very different on the vibe level, I feel it shares a kinship with something like a calculator watch in this regard, which Casio still has plenty of too, by the way. In terms of its attractiveness, the functionality is mostly secondary to the statement. Alright folks, that's my bit. I'd love to hear from you. What do you think about this watch? Would you rock it? Is it a little bit too this or that for you? You know, I could totally see that. Color me curious. I'd love to hear in the comments, so slap someone down there for me. Thanks for taking a little bit of time out of your day to spend with me. I really appreciate it. I hope you're having a rad day wherever you are. In the meantime, you take care.